Okay, so in order to sew your pointe shoes, I have most likely already given you this packet that has all of the steps in it, but this is just gonna be a video that's closer so you can kind of see closer of what's happening, more details. So the first thing you have is your shoes, and then you have elastic. If you're crisscrossing, you have 2. If you're just doing a loop, you have 1. Your satin ribbon, I have some pins or safety pins, whichever one you feel good about. Thread, I would typically use like a white, a cream, peachy pink, something like that that's close to the color of the shoe. But for right now, I'm going to use this brighter pink color just so that you can see what's happening. For your needle, you're going to want to make sure it's pretty sharp at the edge and that the loop is big enough to fit your thread, because some thread is thicker and won't fit in the smaller needles. Scissors and a pencil. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut our elastic and our ribbon. So this shoe is like semi-done, just so I can show you how the ribbon is going to lay. The ribbon is going to lay all the way across the bottom, so you should have 2 ribbons per shoe. Or 1 ribbon per shoe. Then you're going to have either your crisscross elastic, so you're going to have 1, 2, or you're just going to have your elastic that loops 1 loop, so then you'd have 1 per shoe. So I'm going to sew 1 shoe with a loop and 1 shoe with a crisscross. So I'm going to take my elastic, no matter what, I'm going to cut it in half. So I'm going to fold it in half and then cut it and set it aside. And then I'm going to, if I have crisscross elastics, I'm going to do that again so that I have 1 for each shoe. If not, I'm done. So I'm going to take this, fold it in half, and cut. So now I have either my loop or my crisscross. Then I'm going to take my ribbon and fold that in half. This one's pretty long. And we're gonna cut off the excess when we get there later, after we've tied our shoes. So I'm gonna cut this one in half. So then I have 1 ribbon for each one. So if I'm going to loop my elastic, I should have 1 ribbon and 1 elastic. But if I'm going to crisscross, I should have 1 ribbon and 2 elastics. So we're going to set that aside for now. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get my toe pads, whatever situation I have on my feet on, just so that I can do a little test run. So I'm going to put my toe pads on, and if you have toe spacers, this is when you would put those on as well. And I'm going to put each shoe on my foot and just kind of feel how it feels. And then I'm going to try it on the other foot. Because sometimes they will feel identical, or sometimes you'll feel weird. So like I put this one on, and for some reason this foot feels a little bit tighter in this shoe. So I'm going to switch them back. And I'm going to label them as such. So I'm going to label this one now my left foot, and this one my right foot. And I'm going to take either my pencil or a pen, and I'm going to write it on the inside, just where I feel like I won't see it. So I'm going to call this one my left foot. And I'll just put like a giant L somewhere in the shoe. And then I'm going to take the other shoe and I'm going to write an R. I typically avoid writing on the sole of the shoe just because it's going to get sweaty and disappear. If I was feeling super crazy, I'd put like the date on it. So I'd write like, right now it's January, so I'd write Jan of 26. And I could do that to the other shoe, Jan of 26. And those are ready to go. So I'm going to pick a foot with my toe pad on. I'm going to start with my left foot. So I'm going to find my left shoe and I'm going to put it on my foot, confirm that I like that. These drawstrings I'm going to keep using over time. So I'm going to try and make sure I don't sew them in. So then I'm going to take my elastic I'm going to pin it on the back of this shoe. I can pin it on the inside or the outside, it doesn't really matter. For the easiest way to do it, I just pin it on the outside just because we're not sewing it here, we're just mapping out how we're gonna sew it. So I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to try and get it as close to this back seam as I can, but I'm also going to have it at a bit of an angle. So I'm going to hold it at this angle and then I'm just going to go through it and pin it. If I had a safety pin, I could use that too. So I'm going to do that and I'm going to put it on my foot. If I were to loop my elastic, which is what I'm sewing right now, is I'm going to give it some tension, wrap it around the foot, and hold it on the other back angle. I want it so tight that I can like barely stick my finger underneath it. I'm going to go back to my pencil. I'm going to hold it as far back as I can. I'm going to draw this line that's the edge of that shoe. And then I'm also going to put like a tiny, tiny dot in the back so that I know where it went. So that dot went on the shoe and then the line goes on the elastic. So now I'm going to hold it taut again and I'm going to turn my foot to the other angle and I'm going to draw that line. It's a little bit awkward. And then I'm going to put another dot on the drawstring case of where that goes. So then if I were to take off my shoe, you can see the two dots of where I'm going to line up my elastic, and then you can see the line, and over here I have another line. So if I were to pin this side, it would go right here at that angle, and the line lines up and the dots line up. So that's what my loop is going to look like when I sew it. And then I can just let that hang out there because I've already drawn the lines. I know exactly where it's going to go. I don't have to worry about it too much more. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm going to find there's a shiny side and a not so shiny side. I'm going to look for that shiny side and I'm going to hold it in the middle. So I'm going to find the middle of this ribbon, close-ish. It doesn't have to be super precise, but close-ish. And I'm holding the middle. I'm going to take that middle, give it some room, and I'm going to put the shiny side down on the sole of the shoe. So the shiny side goes on this sticker that's probably right there. So shiny, down. And I'm just going to hold it in the middle of the shoe right there. I'm going to put the shoe back on my foot. I haven't pinned anything, so I got to make sure everything stays in order. I'm going to put the heel on my foot. And then I'm going to play with moving this ribbon around. And I want to feel it in the highest point of my arch on my foot. So if my foot were not in the shoe, the highest point of my arch is about right here. So it's a little bit closer to the heel than you'd think. So inside my shoe, this is what it kind of looks like I'm doing, is I'm pulling up, and this is gonna give me the most support right here. So if I were to do that in my shoe, I'm finding that high point. I can move it around to find it. Once I get it, I pull the ribbon up. I'm gonna cross them over each other, and I'm gonna pull them back, because this is kind of how we're gonna start sewing our shoes. And I want to make sure that whatever angle I need is gonna be good, because if I sew it at the wrong angle, it is possibly gonna have this little lumpy spot right here every time I tie it, which I don't want. I don't want any gaps. I want it to be flush with my skin. So I'm gonna hold it kind of taut back here. I'm gonna make sure that it's on the top part of my arch, and I'm gonna do a dot right here on the drawstring casing on both sides of where the ribbon hits. And then I'm gonna draw a line across-ish, just so I know my angle. Then I'm gonna go to the other side and do the same thing. And draw a line. These are pencil lines, so they will come off. So it doesn't have to be the cleanest. So then I'm gonna unloop that. I'm gonna try and keep that ribbon-ish where it is. And I'm gonna pin it in place for now. Just kind of in the same zone, just so I can show you what's happening. So I currently have my 2 dots of where the ribbon is gonna line up with my arch, and then I have a line where that's gonna go, and then on the other side I have the same thing and the line. When I sew my ribbon down, that line isn't going to be exactly there, because I'm going to force the ribbon down into the shoe so it's flush, because I want there to be a little bit more room down there, some give of ribbon, so that the ribbon's not pushing up on my foot. So the line's actually going to sit a little bit lower, like most likely down on that seam, but you'll see it closer when we sew the ribbon. So now that I have labeled this, I don't have to worry about it. We are ready to sew, because everything has a plan of where it needs to go. I could take these things off of it and just remember what my markings are, or I could keep them attached in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to most likely just leave that right there, because it's not super in my way. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna thread our needle. So I'm gonna get out some thread of this fairly brightish color. Hopefully you can see it. I'm gonna give myself a good amount. And what I have done is I have folded it in half, so I have a little loop of the middle, and it goes down, holding the 2 pieces, holding the 2 pieces, holding it all the way until the end, and I'm going to cut it in half there, just so I know that I have a good amount. So I've got a decent amount of thread. I don't want too much, because it's going to knot up if I get crazy, but I don't want to have not enough either and have to kind of go backwards. So I'm going to pick a needle. Make sure that I pick one that I can for sure get my thread through. And it's gonna want to have a pointy tip. If it's not pointy enough, you're not going to be able to puncture through the fabric. So I'm going to take my loop. Where is my loop? There is the loop. I'm going to take that loop and I'm going to thread the loop through the needle. The reason I do this is so that I don't have to tie a knot in my thread when I get there. So I pull the loop through, just like so. and then I'm gonna pull it, pull it, pull it. And my goal when I do this, when I thread it through, is now I have basically 2 threads going through the needle all the way. Is it gonna focus? I have 2 threads going through the needle, and one side has a loop at the end and one side has 2 like raw edges. So I'm going to take my loop edge, I have my loop and my needle, and I'm going to pull my loop longer because I want my loop to be longer than the other 2 threads. So right now it's not a ton longer, but enough longer that I can use that. So now my needle is ready to go. I have a loop and threads. We're gonna set that right there for a moment. I'm gonna go back to my elastic. So I typically will start with an elastic just because I feel like it's easy to access the back of the shoe. So I can take this out. I know exactly where it's gonna go. And I've got this crooked line. Your line should be crooked. It shouldn't be straight across because of the angle that we're gonna sew this on. What I'm gonna do is there's a ton of extra fabric right here. I can either cut it once I have sewn a little bit on, or I can cut it right now. I will typically cut it right now, but I have been known to cut it on the shoe as well. That is like a generous amount, so let's cut off a little bit more. I don't want to get too close to the line because I need some give. So now I've cut it close to the line. I'm going to go back to my shoe and line it up in the shoe. When we sew our shoes, we aren't going to be sewing through the satin side. We're actually going to keep all of our stitching on this flap that comes from the drawstring, just because this is a really sturdy amount of fabric and it's not going to make the outside of your shoe look sad. So we're going to be hanging out right here with this flap. If you struggle this first time, that's totally fine. So I'm going to take my elastic, line it back up with that back dot, and line it up on the line of the shoe. So I'm going to try and make sure that angle is good. If I didn't cut this yet, I would do a tiny bit more. So I'm just going to do a little bit to show you where. So I want to make sure that this cut is in line with the drawstring casing. So what I could do if I didn't cut it is I could just line up the line, and then I would sew a little bit right here on this corner and get the elastic kind of stuck there before I cut it. So now we're ready to do our first stitch. I have my thread and I have my loop longer than the other side. I'm going to keep an eye on this loop. I don't want this loop to disappear. So I'm going to take my needle. I am going to go in my shoe. I am going to look for this flap of fabric and get underneath it. So my needle is going to go underneath that flap through the elastic. So right there, just like so. I'm going to get a decent chunk. I don't want to be too close to the edge, but I want to get a good chunk. So then I'm going to pull my thread through, and I got to keep an eye on that loop. I can't lose my loop. So the raw edge just came out right there, and I'm going to make sure I find that loop. And I'm going to hold my thumb on that loop just so that I don't lose it. So this is where we're at. It's through, and then I've got my loop not quite through yet. So then I'm gonna take my needle. This is how we go around not having to tie a knot in the end. I'm gonna stick my needle through this loop. So through the loop, and I'm gonna pull it all the way through. So my thread is now going through that loop, and then I'm gonna pull it taut, and it just creates one little stitch, and I didn't have to create a knot. So I can give it a real good tug. And that's the only time we really have to worry about that loop. So then my next stitch is gonna go very close to that one. I'm gonna go underneath the drawstring flap, through the elastic, and I'm going to pull it taut. And I'm going to keep going right there for just a second, just to really get that corner established. It doesn't have to be the prettiest thing in the world, because nobody can see it. So I went underneath my drawstring flap, through the elastic, and now I'm going to pull through. So I'm really just getting this corner, and I'm kind of going around the corner a bit, really getting that corner to stick. Then if I hadn't cut, I would cut right there. But since I have, now my goal is I'm going to go up and back down. But remember, there is a drawstring in this casing. I could take this thread out now that I'm in a good spot. So in here, there is a drawstring. I do not want to sew that drawstring at all, otherwise I won't be able to tighten or loosen that for the remainder of having my shoe. So as I go up, I'm going to come down, and I'm going to leave a tiny bit of space as I go up, because I'm going to want to have room to come back down with my thread. So I'm going to take some from the side wall of this drawstring casing, and I'm going to go through the thread. So I went into this side. I didn't really grab anything from the back. I'm still just on the drawstring. I went through the side. I grabbed like a bubble of fabric, and I grabbed the elastic, and I'm going to push all the way through. And we're going to start going up that way. So then I'm going to go slightly further up the shoe, just a little bit. And I'm going to grab more fabric, grab some elastic, and we pull through and give it a good tug. I'm going to go a little bit higher. The closer your stitching is, the more secure we're going to get. But I do want to give myself a little bit of room right now, just because I have to come back down. So you see how we're starting to kind of build that side wall. I want to keep my angle good to match this. I'm going to go back up the side, through the shoe, and pull it tight. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going up into that fabric, through the elastic, and pull it nice and tight. Right now, I'm getting kind of close to the thread that's going to separate the drawstring and where the drawstring casing kind of ends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feel in here for my drawstring, and if I can, I'm going to kind of push it up to the top of the shoe so that I know that I'm not going to sew it. If I'm struggling to feel it, I'm going to be super cautious about this next section. But if I know where it is, I don't have to be that worried. So now we are going to go up a little bit into this, but I can feel my drawstring is right here, so I'm not too worried about getting it. I'm gonna go through, grab some elastic, and pull my needle tight. And I might do one more very close. If I were to be any more nervous about where my drawstring is, I'd kind of pause and start going down right here. So now that's as high as I feel good about going, because I still want access to this drawstring. So now I'm going to start moving slightly back down. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go in like a gap that I haven't sewn and grab more, a tiny bit lower. So instead of going up, we're just going back down. Still the same thing. We're just looping through and pulling through. And I'm going to go through again. Grab some fabric, grab some elastic, and we pull. Remember, it doesn't have to be the prettiest. It just has to be secure. I'm going to keep adding more. Going slightly down with each one. Just filling in those gaps. Just give it a good tug anytime you feel like something's not quite tight enough. And you see how we're going down and just filling in some spots. I want to add more threads, the less secure I feel. So the more small threads I have, the more secure my shoe is going to feel in the end. So now I'm pretty much back down at the bottom, and that's very secure. I could give it a little tug to be certain, but it's not going anywhere. So now I'm back down at this bottom corner. And I'm gonna kinda go around the corner, just like I did when I started moving upwards. So I'm gonna go around the corner, and I'm gonna start filling in these spots around the corner, and I'm gonna eventually go back to my first stitch, how I went straight underneath. So we're gonna start moving across the back of the shoe. So I wanna make sure that my line is still good and there. And I'm picking up underneath again, because now that I'm down, I'm gonna go from underneath the bottom and grab some fabric. Grab some fabric and pull through. And I'm gonna go all the way across to the bottom and just add thread as tightly as I can, because now I'm not gonna come back to this section. So I want to make sure that I get it really snug all the way across. So we've kind of beveled this corner now. I'm gonna give it a good tug. And now I'm gonna go So we're gonna grab it from underneath, go through the bottom, and pull through. Go underneath, really close to that last stitch, and pull through. Underneath, pull through. Underneath, right next to it, and pull through. You can grab bigger sections of fabric and elastic if that makes you feel better. But make sure they're all pretty close by. And we're just gonna go all the way across this elastic. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to be secure. Give it a few good tugs. Here's about what we're looking like. So we've got an up, a down, and we've started moving across. You could have more or less stitching than this, just depending on how you're feeling. Remember, we're just on the flap of the drawstring. We're not going too far through the shoe. See, so this one I have it really tight together, and this one's a little bit further apart. Ideally, I would like this side to look like this bottom one, but we're just going a little bit chunkier so I can show you the whole thing without taking too long. But ideally, I would do it tighter than I'm doing right now. And I'm gonna go back and just kind of check, make sure everything's secure as I keep going. Add some more, because I gotta get all the way to that other corner. So now that I'm all the way to this other edge, I've gone up, I've gone down, and I've gone straight across. I'm going to go around this corner and go up this side and back down, and then I'm going to stop in this bottom corner again. So now that I'm at the corner, I'm going to kind of start to bevel around that corner. So I'm going to go to this corner at an angle. I'm going to go up through and pull it through. Give it a good tug. I'm always keeping my free edge of string. So you remember how we had a free edge and a loop? My goal is always to keep an eye on my free edges and make sure that they are hanging out. So I never want this to get stuck in the shoe, ideally. So then I'm going through the corner, through the elastic, and through. Now I'm gonna start to shift and go up that side wall. So I will grab a little bit of the fabric from the side, loop it under, and grab the elastic and pull through. And loop it through. Remember, this time I'm leaving a little bit more of a gap just because I want to go all the way back around. Keeping it super secure. Grab the flap, grab the elastic, and pull through. And pull through. If I start to get a knot, I'm just gonna pull it back. There we go. So we're still going up. I'm gonna keep going up, and remember the same thing, keep an eye on that drawstring. I never want that drawstring to get caught. So I'm gonna go through, and pull through. Again, one more, and then I'm gonna start to go down. Through, and pull it through. Again, to go down. So I'm going to shift slightly down into this gap, go through, and pull. Go down in this gap, grab a chunk of elastic, and pull. Grab some more, and pull. A little bit lower. Pull it through. So we're just going all the way back down. Trying to keep it as snug as I can, fill in any gaps. I'm going back down to this bottom corner. Give it a good tug. So now that I'm back in this bottom corner, we're gonna have to tie it off. So we went from this corner, we went up, we went down, we went through the bottom, we went to this corner, we went up, and we went back down. So now I would like to end this, but I want to end it in a secure way so that I know that this isn't going to come out. Before I detach my thread, I'm going to give the whole thing a huge tug. Make sure everything is solid. If I were wanting to be more secure, I could go across the bottom again. Ideally, my bottom is tighter, more like the sides, but I just did it gappier for now, just so I could show you guys what's happening. So then I'm going to go through if I want to get rid of this. I'm gonna go through it again, grab fabric, grab elastic. I've gone through. I'm gonna hold on to this loop because I don't want to lose it. So I have my loop and I'm gonna pull my needle through. I still have my loop. I'm gonna take my needle. I'm gonna make my loop a little smaller. My needle is gonna go through the loop, up, through the loop again. So I went through the loop twice. And now I'm going to take my needle and pull it through and push all of that to the end, and I've created a knot. You can knot it once or you can knot it twice. So I'm gonna knot it twice just so I can show you again how I did it. So I'm gonna take some fabric, take the elastic, pull it through with the needle, but keep an eye on this loop. I'm holding the loop. I still have the loop. And I've got my needle. I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna go through the loop. And I'm gonna twist my needle back up and I'm gonna go through it again. So that's the look that we kind of end with. I'm gonna take this edge of my needle and I'm going to pull it taut. And now I've got a knot. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'm gonna cut this off. I've got a few loose ones. So in the end, this is how we're looking. It's secure, it's completely done. I have the option now that I can move on to this elastic if I want to. This elastic is going to be a little more awkward just because we've tightened up our space. So what I can do is I can take the fabric of the heel and I can flip the shoe kind of inside out. It's not stretching or bending anything, I'm just moving the fabric back. This gives me a lot more open space to do that back area. So I'm gonna take my loop, make sure it's not twisting. If I twist my loop now, there's no going back. So I wanna make sure that it's untwisted. It just looks like that. I could stick my ankle in there and everything would be great. So I'm gonna pin that where it's supposed to go. I'm gonna keep an eye on that. And I'm gonna pin it. Okay, so now everything is secure. I'm gonna take my loop, flip it out, and I can flip my loop back out too. So now I'm working with a space that I can actually see, and I'm gonna make sure that my line is on the right spot because I want that angle to be good. So this is what it's gonna look like when I sew this section. So I have to go back to my needle. Where did my needle go? I just had it. Here she is. Got my needle. I've got some fabric on here, but not enough to really worry about doing anything. So I'm just gonna take that fabric off. I'm gonna rethread my needle exactly like I did not that long ago. Find that halfway loop. Find my needle. Thread this loop through my needle. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it, everything is great. Take my loop and I'm gonna pull it all the way through and I'm gonna make it my long side. So I don't want them to be equal in length. I want one side longer and one side shorter. So right now, You can see my short end. Right. My short end is right there, and then my loop end hangs lower. So I'm gonna go back to my elastic. This side I haven't cut yet. So I'm gonna show you how I would do that if I weren't to have cut the elastic yet. So I'm going to make sure that it's pinned in the exact right spot that I need. I'm gonna get my needle and go underneath that flap once more. So I'm gonna go under the drawstring flap. I'm kind of coming at it from an angle. And I'm gonna grab a chunk of the elastic. Right there. I'm gonna pull it through. Find that loop, don't lose that loop back there. I'm gonna take this loop. I don't want it to go through, so I'm gonna loop my thumb through it so I don't lose it. So you see I've got my loop. And then I'm going to take my needle, go through the loop. So I have the loop here. I'm going to go through the loop, pull my needle through, pull the extra fabric through, and I'm going to tighten it. So now I've got just one good loop. I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to go kind of very, very close. Go underneath the fabric, through the elastic, take my needle through, and pull through. So I'm going to do this corner just a few times to really make sure it's secure. Kind of going side by side. And pull it through. Once I feel like super amazing, I can slowly start going up. But I want to be checking my pencil line, make sure I'm in a good spot. So I'm gonna go and take a chunk from the side of that drawstring, go underneath the elastic, and pull it through. And keep going up and leave some room. Grab a chunk from the drawstring casing, grab a chunk of the elastic, pull the needle and the thread through. Keep going, leaving little gaps. Remember, your elastic is at an angle, so that's going to affect how many threads you have to do. And the angle was just determined by your foot size, your foot shape, your foot size, all of that good stuff. Grab a chunk, pull through, keep going. If you end up grabbing a chunk of the satin on the other side for now, it's not the end of the world. No one will supersede it. The goal is to try to get less punctures through the satin. But if it happens, it happens. So I've still got stitching going up. It doesn't have to be that pretty. Nobody's gonna see it. Now that I am up close and personal with the drawstring up here, I'm gonna try and find it because I don't want to accidentally sew it. So I'm going to find it and push it to the top if I can, so that I can do a couple stitches right above that seam without worrying about catching the drawstring. You don't have to do a couple stitches up there. I just do it to feel more secure. Don't let any knots happen. Always pull them through. Always keep these 2 threads loose. If you have to adjust your new needle, do that, but never let them get stuck, because that's our safety measure in case if something happens and we lose our needle or we find a knot. This is gonna help us. That's partly why I love to not do the knot method. We love the loop. So I'm gonna do maybe 1 or 2 more going up. Let's do, yeah, 1 more, just because this one has a pretty sharp angle. So now I've got my stitching going up and I've got some gaps in between. Now I'm gonna go back down doing the same thing, and I'm just gonna fill in those gaps. So I got that little knot out that I was starting to see. Always keep an eye on your knots. Now I'm going back down still. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to pull through than others. That's okay. I can always go back and check on this other side to make sure that I don't have anything coming out. Now that my sidewall is pretty secure, I'm gonna take this pin out just so I have less things potentially stabbing me. But I'm still in the right spot, and I've got that angle so secure that this is not really gonna move or shift. I'm gonna keep going down. We're getting it real secure. just lots and lots of loops. I'm getting back down to these bottom corners. And my next step is that I'm gonna have to go across. But I can't really go across when this is in the way. So now I could cut this now that I just feel so great about how secure it is. So I'm gonna make sure that everything is all lined up and ready to go. And then without cutting my thread or anything that I've stitched, I'm going to very gently try and cut this elastic in a straight line. Again, not cutting the thread or the fabric, just the elastic. So now I don't have to worry about that excess fabric in the way, but I also know that it's in the exact right spot. So I'm gonna do a couple more in this bottom corner and then go across. Anything I can to make them secure. Trying to keep my threads still pretty close together. The tighter they are together, the more secure I'm going to be. So now I need to go across the bottom. So I'm going to go back to that top system that we started with, where I grab a chunk of that flap, a chunk of the elastic from the bottom, and I pull it through. And I'm just going to keep doing that very, very close together, all the way across the bottom. With your point shoes, they have, come on, there we go. They have the satin fabric on the outside, and then they've got this white fabric on the inside. If you end up grabbing a chunk of the white fabric, that is completely okay. Nothing to worry about. Because if you've grabbed the white fabric, you probably haven't grabbed the satin yet. And even if you grab the satin, that's okay. It'll just be one little stitch that you can see on the outside of the shoe. Why don't you want to go? There we go. So again, I'm just grabbing from the flap, grabbing underneath, and pulling through. I'm gonna try and keep them pretty close together, but I could be doing a better job at it right now just because I want to move a little bit quicker. Some fabric from the elastic came out a little bit, so I'm just gonna get that out of my way. We're still very secure. Underneath the flap, underneath the elastic, and pull. It's very, very repetitive work. So once you kind of get it figured out, it's pretty easy. might have gone through. Oh, yep. See, here is a good example right there. So on this one, I ended up grabbing a tiny bit of the white fabric right there. But when I flip it over, I didn't grab any of the satin. So all what I did was just grab a tiny bit of white extra fabric. Not the end of the world. Everything's gonna be great. Nobody will even know, except for me. And now you, I guess. So we're gonna keep going. And even if I did grab the satin, that is totally okay. I would just be able to see one little stitch. And I'm still going across, trying to keep it as tight as I can, but right now I'm also kind of moving fast. So yours will be more put together on this bottom row than mine is. I'm still just trying to get all the way to the very, very corner so that I can go up to the side and back down and cut it off. And then I'll have one loop fully done. When you loop your elastic, you have less sewing to do instead of the crisscross method. So really, you're doing the easy thing right now. And I'm still getting this corner. If that extra corner fabric was really bugging me, I could just cut it off. But it's not, so I'm just gonna sew it down. And my elastics are very, very close to this back heel stitch, so I'm pretty excited about that. Sometimes you do them and they're not close enough, but this time they're looking good. I'm happy about it. Now I'm in this corner. So I'm going to do one last stitch in the corner from underneath, and then I'm going to shift around the corner and start going up. So I'm going to kind of just move the angle of my shoe. And I'm going to grab a little bit and a little bit and pull. Oh, my needle came off, but luckily my thread is still right there. So I'm just going to rethread that edge and get those two pieces through. It happens more frequently than I would like to say. But it's not bad, because that is also why the loop method works so great, because I could have done that, or I could have used that to get a knot out. So I pull it through, and I'm still making sure that my raw edge is not all the way down in the shoe yet. It's still kind of hanging out up here by the needle. So we're going around the corner, grabbing a loop of fabric, going through, and pull. Let me get you a closer look at this sidewall. We're going to go down through that sidewall underneath the elastic. Pull it through. And give it a good tug. Keep going up the sidewall. Pull it through. And give it a good tug. This side isn't going to go as high up just because of the angle of the shoe, and that's okay. So we're just going to make sure this side is extra secure. So we're going to keep going. Up, up, up. And I'm going to find that drawstring in the back. The back one kind of likes to get lost. So I'm going to make sure she's sitting up high so I don't accidentally grab it. I don't want to stitch it down. And pull, give it a good yank. Grab a little bit more, keeping an eye on that drawstring. And pull her through. One more, very, very close. And then I'm gonna start heading back down the side. Start filling in those gaps, because I want this to be super secure. We're almost done with our elastics, so close. Yours will probably have a prettier thread that matches the shoe better. You won't have this vibrant pink. So things will be looking more matchy on your end. We're going down all the way to that bottom corner. The more stitches we do, the more secure we get. So I'm in the bottom corner, and I want to get rid of everything, but first I'm going to give it a yank test. Make sure nothing is lost, everything is secure. I could do another row across the bottom if I wanted, but I feel really good about how secure this is. So I'm going to go down and do one more loop on the bottom. I'm going to pull my needle through. And I'm going to hold on to this loop. Remember, I want to hold this loop. So I'm going to pull it through, and I've got my loop in my thumb. I'm going to take my needle, and I'm going to go through the loop, come up and go through the loop again, and I'm going to pull it all tight. And that's one knot. I'm going to do another one just to be extra safe. I'm going to go through the fabric, find my loop, don't lose my loop. I'm going to go through with my needle, loop it through, grab my needle and pull everything super tight. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to cut my needle off now that I've pulled it all pretty tight. So now we have got the back with 2 elastics sewn. And I can give it a yank and nothing's going to move. So if I flip the shoe back right side, this is what we're looking at. You can't really see any stitching, and it's super secure. So again, this is what she looks like on the inside. Then we're going to switch to our ribbon, because right now we are halfway done with this one shoe, which is great. We have our ribbon, and it's pretty long. And this one we are not going to cut at all because I want it to stay looped across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my lines and make sure everything is lined up how it needs to be and at the angle it needs to be. And then I'm actually going to take my line and I'm going to push the ribbon slightly down. So instead of my line lining up right here on this edge, I want it to actually line up on this seam on the inside. So I'm going to push it down and maintain that really good angle. So the line is still there. If you can see the pencil line. I've lined up my pencil line further down, just so that I'm giving myself a little bit more give on the shoe. So then I'm going to repin it in this spot. Because I want my ribbon to be able to lay flat across the bottom of the shoe. So as long as I maintain this angle and the correct dots, I can move it a little bit. So I'm going to go all the way across, kind of pushing down the side. Give it a good push down. Line up on this side. And again, my line is kind of lining up with this seam right there. So it's a tiny bit lower than when I was putting pressure on my arch, but that's what I want. I want to take that pressure off my arch. So now my ribbon is exactly where it needs to be, and there's some give room at the bottom. So it's not gonna cut off circulation at the bottom of my foot. So now all is ready to go. If this heel is kind of getting in my way, I can do the same thing that I did on the last one and just kind of push it out. And then it's not in the way. And it also gives me a little bit more visibility. So I've got my needle threaded. Same way we did before. Long loop hanging off the edge. So I gotta find my loop, make sure it's the long one. Oh, see, my loop one was short. So let's fix it so my loop is long. Okay. So now we're going to start the same way that we started everything else. We're basically doing the same thing. The only thing that's going to be different is how I go across the bottom, and I'll show you how I do that. So we've got to go under that flap right there. So that flap we're going to go underneath. There is not very much stretch happening, so we got to be more cautious about how this is going to go. Make sure that angle is really good. We're going to go through that diagonal corner under the flap and pick up the ribbon. We're going to pull it through, and I'm going to find the loop of my needle. I don't want to lose that. Alright, I got my loop secure. I'm going to take my needle and go through my loop and pull it all through and get it really tight. One good tight loop right there. I'm going to do another one pretty much right next to that. Really get this corner established. And just another loop. Pull her through. I might do 2 or 3 before I start going up the side, just so that I can feel really good about that corner. Alright. I've still got my pin in place, so nothing's moving. Anytime you're worried about something moving, just find a way to pin it down and you won't have to worry about it. So now I'm going to go up the sidewall again. So I'm going to grab a chunk of fabric from the drawstring casing, go underneath it, go up underneath the ribbon, right there, pull it through and give it a good tug. So again, going this one, I want it pretty secure, but I'm also going to go back down, so leave a tiny gap to go back through. And again, go up, grab a chunk through the ribbon, and pull the thread through. I'm going to go all the way up close-ish to that drawstring seam. Remember, don't sew in your drawstring. So if I were even a little bit worried about my drawstring, I'm only going to go like one little stitch above that seam, and then I'm going to come back down. So now I have these little gaps that I'm going to fill in on the way down. I'm going to go through the drawstring casing, underneath it, go underneath the ribbon, poke my needle through, and come out. Don't want to get none of that involved. There we go. There we go. Go a little bit lower. Do the same thing. And pull it tight. Go a little bit lower. Your ribbon is kind of your main arch support, so we want to make sure that your ribbon is good and secure. But we've also got the added safety measure of the fact that we are not going to cut the bottom ribbon. So if for some absolutely crazy reason this stitching on my ribbon was not very secure, the ribbon is stuck underneath my foot. So the ribbon isn't going to go anywhere or injure me or do anything crazy, because I just have added a little safety feature. There we go. So now we're just going down. Remember, it doesn't have to be pretty, just secure. So whatever that looks like for you. Those are getting in my way, so I'm just gonna shove them in the box of the shoe. Because sometimes I do that when you haven't cut them yet. Alright, so now I am all the way down. I went up and back down. If you can see. Right there. So now I'm gonna have to go across the bottom. But I'm not cutting this at all. So I'm gonna take that out just because it's in my way, but I could pin it right here a little bit lower if I wanted to be really worried about that line. So I could pin it just a little bit lower so it's out of my way. But the line is still really good and secure. So now what I'm gonna do kind of like a little bubble. So I'm going to look for the line of this flap right here. I want to kind of still stay on that flap that I'm working on. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go on the ribbon, and I'm going to puncture through the ribbon, and I'm going to pick up the flap. So I'm going to go through, puncture, pick up the flap, and come back out. So I've picked up the flap and the ribbon, and I made just like a little loop. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go down through the ribbon, make a bubble that has the flap in it, come back up, and pull through. So I'm kind of creating like a little pinch where I've got ribbon drawstring flap, and then ribbon again. So again, this is kind of what it's looking like as I pull it through. So I went through the ribbon, I went down, I picked up the flap, and I went back out. So I'm gonna keep going across just like this. And the tighter I get it, the closer I get it, the more secure we're gonna be. But I just really want you to see what's happening. So you're pulling through. Nice, good. You can really see like the individual stitches right now, which is not necessarily what I'm going for, but I want you to see it right now just so that you can see what's happening. I could do these closer together if I wanted them more secure. Again, we go down and through, and you'll kind of just, the more you do, the easier it's gonna feel like you can just see where you're going. By the time you get halfway across, you're gonna feel real good. So I'm getting to a point where, let's say I didn't get enough thread. So I'm like, oh no, I don't know how much more I can do with this little thread. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just do a loop like I've already been doing. Pull it through and keep that loop in my hand, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm gonna go through it twice, and I'm gonna end it and cut it off. So then I'm gonna cut that off right there, and I'm just gonna start all over like I normally would have. Easy peasy. But that would only be something that you need to do if you didn't cut enough thread, which is okay. So then we're just gonna rethread a needle and start over, which is an option that you have. So this one doesn't need to be as long. You shouldn't aim to do something like that, but just in case, if that happens, I want you to be prepared. So you basically are just gonna end it and start all over. So then I get my loop again, I get my length, and we're just gonna pretend like we're starting all over. That's all that's gonna happen. I just want you to be prepared. So I'm gonna grab a chunk and kind of just start-ish from where I left off, but I'm gonna find that loop and make my knot. And go through the loop and pull it tight. So then we're basically just acting like we never left off. So now you're prepared for any situation that could happen. And if I was super nervous, I could go back a little bit in my stitching and then come forward again. Which you shouldn't be nervous if your knot was really good. And I'm just looping through again like I never even stopped. But now you're prepared in case if that happens. And we're gonna keep going, pinching, all the way to the edge. Oh, see, that time I didn't grab the drawstring casing, so I gotta make sure I grab that drawstring casing. Otherwise, I'm just sewing my ribbon for no reason. So make sure every time that you get a chunk of fabric, you get a chunk of that drawstring casing. It needs to for sure be in there. And I'm gonna go all the way to the corner. And you guessed it, we're gonna go up and back down. So now I've gone across. I'm gonna go in this corner, grab the corner, and go through. Get that diagonal little bevel going, and then I'm gonna shift and go sideways through. sideways, grab the fabric, grab the ribbon, and pull through. Sideways, sideways, and pull through. Remember, leave a little bit of a gap because we're going to come back down on this one to get to that bottom corner. You could technically make a knot at the top. I just don't. I like all my knots in those bottom corners. And pull through. Go a tiny bit up, but really keep an eye on that drawstring. Remember, we don't want to sew the drawstring at all. And I'm going to go back down, fill in some of those gaps. Again, we're just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over. Now I'm back at the bottom. I could go across again, or I could cut. For this one, I'm gonna go across the bottom just because I haven't done that yet. And I want you to see just the difference. Your bottom stitches could be tighter together though than mine are, then you wouldn't feel even the slightest need to go across again. Your ribbon in general doesn't see as much tugging and pulling as your elastics do. The worst part about having pins stuck in is that they like to catch on the edges of the pin. So now that everything's secure, I'm just gonna take that out because it's bugging me. And I'm just going across again, just for fun. You don't have to do this. You could have stopped at that back corner. So now I'm all the way back to the first side. I went up, down, across, up, down. I could have stopped there, but I went across just again, just to make myself feel extra safe. So I'm going to do one more stitch where I'm going to take the needle, go through. I'm going to keep an eye on this loop. I'm going to pull my needle through. I'm going to go through the loop, and I'm gonna pull it tight, and then I'm gonna cut. I could do that twice, or I could do it just the once. Make sure it's real snug, give it the yank test, and then cut the fabric, or cut your thread off. So you see, it's not the prettiest, but she's secure. And then I can go and do that last one exactly like that, and this shoe will be done, completely done. All right, so now we have sewn this elastic, and one side of our ribbon. So I've got my needle rethreaded, I've got a loop. I've got everything pinned. I'm going to check this angle where I have it pinned to make sure it's good, that I like it. If I don't like it, I'm going to re-pin it and make sure that I can see a good angle going on. The worst thing I can do with my ribbon is sew on a weird angle, so I can kind of see my pencil line just right there. And that's exactly where I want it. So I'm going to make sure that I maintain that angle. I got my thread. I'm going to go through that corner. Really establish one corner. I go underneath the flap, through the ribbon. I'm going to pull the needle through. And I'm going to look for this loop right here. So I'm going to hold on to that loop. I'm going to take my needle and go through the loop, pull it, let go, and pull it tight. So I got one really secure knotted loop. I'm going to do one more, pretty much exactly right there again, right by it. Get that corner really established. Give it a good tug. And then I'm going to slowly move up and make sure that my angle stays good. So I'm going to keep holding the ribbon in place. I'm going to go grab a chunk from the side, go underneath the ribbon, and go up on the ribbon. And then I'm going to pull my needle through. And I'm going to just keep repeating that process, going up. Same thing that we've been doing this whole time. Right now I've got my thumb of my opposite hand holding the ribbon exactly in place, so it is not going to move. I'm going to go up a little bit to the drawstring, but I'm going to feel for my drawstring. I'm right on a seam of the side of the shoe, so it's a little bit harder to find. So I'm going to be really extra cautious, and I'm not going to move further past the seam of my drawstring. Just because I want to be safe, I don't want to get that drawstring at all. So now I'm going to go right back down because I just got kind of to the top of this seam. And I can't feel my drawstring very well, so I'm going to be safe. It's always best to be safe than sorry with your drawstring. Now I'm just going to go back down and fill in some of these gaps. Oh, got my little pin in there. Perfect. More from the side. Pull it through. Got my thread wrapped around my shoe. And I'm pulled through. Most things with your thread are easily fixable. You just kind of have to untangle a tiny bit. Especially if you don't keep a really good track of it. And then it gets long. So we went all the way back down. We went up and then down. Now we're going to go through the corner again to get us to the bottom. Then I'm gonna start my bottom row going across. So I'm gonna take a little pinch. I'm gonna go on the ribbon. I'm gonna go straight down, come back up while picking up a little bit of the drawstring fabric. So the drawstring fabric is right there in that bubble. And I'm gonna pull it through. To create a loop. I'm gonna give my needle, my two little extra pieces are right there and it's making me nervous, so I'm just gonna tug them a little bit longer. Don't want to lose my needle. So we're gonna keep going. We're gonna go down, pinch the drawstring casing, come back up, and pull through. Go down, pinch my drawstring, pull through. Down, pinch it through, pull. And we're gonna keep doing that all the way across. The closer together we can get our stitches, again, the more secure. It's basically just doing the same thing over and over and over until you're just sick of it. Darn pin keeps getting in my way. Because that is bugging me, I'm gonna just take it out. But I've still got my thumb holding the ribbon exactly where I want it. So I'm not worried about the ribbon moving or shifting in any way. Every time I go down, I need to make sure that I pinch the drawstring casing in between my ribbon. Otherwise, I'm just sewing my ribbon for no reason. So I need to make sure my drawstring gets stuck in that bubble when I pull it out. And pull through. So right now, I've got to make sure that I get this fabric stuck in between. So I go down, I pinch, come through. It's just a ton of loops after loops after loops. Right there, I kind of feel like I left too big of a gap, so I'm going to go back one more stitch and fix that. Always making sure I got a good pinch of the fabric. I'm still avoiding the satin on the other end. If I pick up a little bit of the white fabric, that's not the end of the world. And nobody will know. But I don't want to grab the satin from the other side. Just because I want to make sure everything is nice and pretty by the time we're done. Still making sure I'm pinching both fabrics in between my sewing loops. Giving it all a good tug. all the way to the opposite edge. Then I'm at the corner. I'm gonna do a little corner diagonal stitch. Pull it through, and I'm gonna go up that side wall. Pinch it from the side, through. Pinch it from the side, pull it through. It doesn't have to be the prettiest, as long as you feel secure. Make sure that you grab a good chunk of each fabric. I'm gonna go 1, maybe 2 above, because right here I can feel the drawstring. If I couldn't feel the drawstring, I would be pretty cautious right here and might start going back down. If I really wanted to, if I didn't want to go back down, I could stitch it right here, knot my end, and call it a day. But again, I just like when my knots are at the bottom. It's just slightly personal preference, slightly because I feel like it just gets more secure the more stitches I do on the up and down. So I'm going to go all the way back down to that bottom corner, still doing that same loop. Now that I'm at the bottom, I'm going to go through one more time, just like a normal stitch. And I'm going to keep an eye on this loop. I don't want this loop to disappear. So I'm going to hold this loop while I pull my needle through. I'm going to have my needle go through it once, loop it over, and go through twice. So that's my ending look. I'm going to grab the sharp end of my needle and pull my needle, all that fabric through, and give it a really good tug. And I can do that one more time. So I'm going to take my fabric, do one more loop, hold my loop strong, pull my needle through. I'm going to go loop it once, loop it twice, tighten it, give it a good yank, give my ribbon a good yank, and then cut my thread off. And now I have a complete shoe. So I've got my ribbon sewn all the way down. I've got my other ribbon sewn all the way down. And I've got my 2 back elastics. And I can give everything a real good tug and not worry about it. And there's a little bit of give in my ribbon, which is what I want. I want it to be able to lay flat in the foot. And then when we're in class, we are going to tie these, so they're extra long right now, your ribbons. We're going to tie them in class. And we're going to tie them so that the knot stops in this back corner where there's not really like a bone or a tendon. There's like a little give spot right here. That's where the knot's going to go. The knot is going to have about 2-3 inches of fabric after it. I'm going to cut it at an angle. And then because it's ribbon and it's going to fray if I don't, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a lighter and I'm just going to burn the edge just a little bit so it kind of melts and it won't fray. And then that shoe is done. And your loop is completely done, and we're ready for class. This shoe we're gonna sew crisscross. So we're gonna start by putting our toe pad on, making sure that it is the correct foot, and slipping our foot in just to verify everything is in the right place. We're gonna take our 2 elastics. For this shoe we're gonna have 2, and then we're gonna have 1 ribbon. So we're gonna take our shoe and we're gonna line up the elastic as close to the back corner as we can. So I'm gonna put it about here. And I'm just gonna pin it in place. It's got a slight angle. It's not up and down. It's almost like 45-degree angle, but not quite. Because we're gonna crisscross it, I'm already just gonna put the second elastic on the back. Again, slight angle, as close to that back heel seam as we can. Right now I'm just putting it on the outside of the shoe just so that we can draw our lines. It's not gonna be that crazy. Then I'm gonna take my ribbon. As you can see, I have a shiny side and a kind of dull side. So I'm gonna take the shiny side, I'm gonna fold it in half-ish. It doesn't have to be precise, but close-ish. So I'm gonna find-ish the middle. I'm gonna take the middle and I'm gonna put it down on the sticker of the shoe. So I'm going to take the shiny side and put it down on the sticker. Most shoes have a sticker here, that's why I say a sticker. But it'll just go down on the sole. I'm going to put the shoe back on. Let me get that out of the way. So shiny side down, foot in. It doesn't super matter where the ribbon is yet, and I'm going to slip my heel on. And then I'm going to take the ribbon and I'm gonna kind of find the high point of my arch. So if I were on my other foot, let me just show you what it would look like. So my arch has a high point right here. It'll usually be closer to your heel, but some people it is lower. But mine, I'm gonna find the highest point and it's about here. So I'm gonna have the ribbon sitting in that spot on my foot, like so. And this is about how it's gonna be in that shoe. So this is what my foot looks like inside the shoe. So I'm gonna find that spot and I'm gonna kind of wiggle it around and make sure I can find it. So it's the spot that I feel the most lifted. So it's about back there. So I'm gonna find that on this foot inside the shoe. I'm gonna give it a good tug, make sure that it's in the right spot. Then I'm going to cross my elastic over. Let me grab my pencil. And I'm gonna mark these spots with my pencil just because this is where I'm gonna receive the most arch support. And if I'm crisscrossing my elastic, I want the most support right there hugging that arch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a little dot tick mark on the drawstring casing of the edges of this ribbon. And then I'm going to go straight across the ribbon. And then I'm gonna go to the other side and do the same thing. So I'm gonna do a dot, dot, and then I'm gonna go straight across. These are pretty important to make sure you get in the right spot because our elastics are gonna go there for crisscross. So then as long as I know that this goes to this shoe, it doesn't matter where I put it. I can slip it out or I can just slide it out of the way for now. Then I'm gonna take my elastics that are pinned to the back. I'm gonna make them nice and tug. Give it a nice good pull and then wrap it across. So you see these dots that we made for the ribbon. I'm gonna put my elastic in those dots. So it's all gonna line up in that one spot. So I'm gonna put it as snug as I think makes sense. What I want is I want to barely be able to stick a finger under there. So I don't want it so loose that I could easily stick multiple. But I also don't want it so tight that I can't even like get underneath, because that'll cut off circulation. So I want it tight to barely fit my finger underneath, but not a lot of give. Once I find that spot, I'm going to go all the way to the side and I'm going to draw a line across the elastic where the top of that seam is, so that I know where to put this. So then I'm going to verify that, try it one more time. Make sure that I'm committed to this spot. Now that I feel good about it, I went in between the two dots, draw my line. I'm going to keep a hold of this elastic. Sometimes it helps to hold it on the other end. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to draw whatever angle this pin is at. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Make sure it's good tightness. Come over here, put it in between the two dots. Make sure that I really like it. And then draw it with a pencil. Now I gotta go to the other side. Make sure that my line stays in place. And I'm gonna go across that seam. The outside feels a little bit weird when you're mapping it, but the mapping it is the most important part right now. So we wanna make sure our mapping is really solid. So we've got our elastic figured out, and our ribbons figured out. And then I'm gonna slip my foot out. And everything is pretty much ready to be sewn. I'm gonna pin this down in here just so that I don't lose it. I wanna make sure that I never forget where each thing comes from. So then my back elastics, I want to make sure that I always keep this line true. So I'm not gonna work on this one quite yet. It'll just get in my way, so I'm just gonna pin it off to the side. I could also just have it sitting here if I wasn't doing other things, but if I had too many other elastics hanging around, I would just keep it pinned because I don't wanna lose it. So then I'm going to take this elastic out and I'm going to pin it in the back of the shoe, and my goal is always to keep these back elastics as close to this back seam as possible. So I'm gonna line it up on this back heel, and I'm gonna try and keep my elastic line exactly where it needs to be. So you see, line perfectly lined up, and then I'm really close to this back heel seam. What I can do, because I don't necessarily trust myself to keep this angle very great, I'm going to pin it where it is, but I'm going to pin it a little bit lower so that I can still kind of sew without this pin getting in the way. I can still move this. I could also pin it on the inside because I'm going to be sewing on the inside, so that's probably my best idea. So I'm going to make sure that line is good. I'm going to pin it on the inside, right in a good spot. The thing about our back elastics, especially when you cross, is things kind of start to feel a little crazy on the inside. It feels like you're tucked in too deeply. So the thing I like to do is I like to take the heel and just stretch the fabric a tiny bit, not very much, but it'll automatically kind of flip the heel inside out. So just flip the heel inside out, and then we've got a ton more surface area and more light to use. So then I'm going to thread my needle. I'm gonna get a good amount of thread. I don't want too little, otherwise I'm gonna have to start over again. But I don't want it so long that I'm gonna just create a ton of knots. So you're kind of gonna figure out the amount that you like to use the more that we do it. So the more shoes you do, the more practice you get. Where did I put my needle? There it is. So I'm gonna take my loop. So I have my thread halfway folded in half. I've got my loop, and I'm going to take my loop and I'm gonna thread the loop through the needle. Just like that. My loop went through. I'm gonna pull my loop. So right now I've got my loop in my hand. And I'm gonna pull the loop so that it's the longer end. So my non-looped side is shorter. It's about like half the length. And then my loop is all the way down here. So I'm gonna hold this in place pretty good. I've got my needle. Move my scissors out of the way. So I'm gonna come over here to my heel seam. So what I'm gonna do, get that out of my way. I'm gonna go underneath the flap. So everything that we're doing is on the drawstring flap. So we're hanging out on this fabric because it's some pretty strong fabric. You can go through the lining, the white fabric, but your goal is not to puncture through the satin. But the lining itself is fine to go through. So I'm going to get a good chunk from underneath here. And I'm going to do one pull through. So I have grabbed the flap underneath and I went up and through the elastic. And I'm going to pull all the way through with my needle, and don't lose that loop, that really long loop that we made at the very end. Find it, don't let it get lost, and don't pull it all the way through. So here's my loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and go through the loop, pull it through, and then pull the entire thing really snug. That way I didn't need to make a knot. I'm gonna do it in that spot right-ish next to it, just a couple times, just to really solidify that spot before I go anywhere. So I'm gonna pull it all the way through. Good tug, make sure you're making everything super snug. Another time, about right there. Pull it all the way through. So now that I've kind of got things in place, I could cut my elastic across the bottom right here, or I could go all the way up and all the way down. I'm going to go up and down just so that we can see what it's like. So now what I'm going to do is I've got this one corner done. So I'm going to start grabbing a pinch of the fabric from the side, going underneath it and grabbing a pinch of the elastic, and I'm going sideways through, if you can see. And I'm gonna go all the way through around that side and give it a good snug pull. I'm gonna go all the way up to at least that seam. And I'm gonna make it a tiny bit gappy, just a little bit, because I'm gonna go all the way up and all the way back down. And I wanna make sure I leave room to go down. So I'm gonna have a little bit of space in between each stitch, but not a ton. The more stitches I do in the long run, the more secure my shoe is gonna be. So I'm gonna keep pulling through. So once I get close to the drawstring seam, what I want to do is I want to feel for my drawstring, because the last thing I want to do is sew my drawstring in one spot, because I'm going to keep using it over time. So I'm going to feel for my drawstring. If I cannot find my drawstring, I'm not really going to go above that seam, because it is just a risk. But I can kind of feel it about here. So I'm going to go a little bit higher than that drawstring, just 1 or 2 stitches higher, so that I can get more security on the side. And I'm going to go one more tiny little chunk. Again, taking it from the side, going through the elastic, and pulling through. So now I've got all the way up the side, and I'm going to go back down. So I'm going to grab from that side wall, go through the elastic, pull it through, good tug. The more stitches I do, the more secure this is going to be, and I want my elastics really secure. Good tug. Grab it from the side. And pull. And I'm just making my way all the way back down. It doesn't have to be the prettiest. It can be a little messy. Nobody's gonna see it as long as it's secure. So then I'm back down in this bottom corner, kind of. Maybe one more stitch away. Yeah, so let's go around that corner. You're kind of beveling a little bit around the corners, going diagonal. So instead of going straight across through, I'm going diagonally up. And I'm going to give it a good tug. So here is where I'm going to go across, and I need to cut this extra fabric, otherwise it's just going to get in my way. And because I established this sidewall, I don't have to worry about my elastic moving around. So I can take that away. So now I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to cut across that straight line, but I'm going to not cut my thread, and I'm not going to cut the shoe. So I got to be pretty good about it, making sure everything stays aligned. Keep going. And just make sure you don't cut any of those threads off. So now everything is ready to go. And I can use my thumb from this hand to keep everything in place. So I'm going to grab my needle that I have just kind of hanging here. Verify that these extra tails that are kind of folded down, don't let them ever get stuck in the sewing that we're doing of the shoe. We want them to remain loose. So I kind of keep them a little bit higher up by the needle, but I hold the needle secure enough that they don't come out. But that's kind of like our security measure so that we don't lose too many things. So then I'm going to go down across the bottom. So I'm going to take a little chunk underneath this flap and pinch them together. So I'm going to go underneath and up through. So I went underneath that flap, pinched the elastic with it, and up. For these back elastics, you want to keep your stitches as close together as possible. You can also go a little bit higher up and take a bigger section this way if you feel like the elastic is kind of weirdly fraying. So we're going to go underneath the drawstring flap, up onto the elastic, and pull through. And we're just going to keep repeating this, like very, very close together. The smaller sections that we grab side by side, and the more of them that we end up doing across, the more secure our shoe is going to be. So we've got a few good amounts just right here going across. We're gonna keep going across, doing the same underneath the drawstring, come through the elastic. Underneath that flap, through the elastic. We're just gonna keep looping. Giving it a good tug. For those sidewalls, we went up and then back down, so that gave us more security, but these ones we're not gonna go back across. So we wanna make sure we fill in all those gaps right away. So the bottom kind of takes a little bit more time. If you were feeling absolutely crazy at the end, you could go all the way across the bottom again if you were just super nervous. But if you do the bottom decent right now, you should not have to. And then these back stitches are the easiest little spots. The hard part when you crisscross is going to be when we do the arch sections. The front little elastics and ribbon. Now I'm just going to keep this system going all the way until I get to that last corner. Again, it does not have to be pretty, it just has to be secure. Nobody can see this but you. Then I feel like my extra strings are getting a little close to the shoe, so I'm going to give my needle just a tiny pull and get them further out. I'm going to keep going until I get all the way to that corner. And then I'm sure you guessed it, we're going to go up that sidewall and back down. So I'm going to start to go around this corner, kind of at that diagonal angle we talked about on the last corner. So I'm just kind of going diagonally through, make sure that I grab the bottom and the elastic. Still trying not to puncture the satin though. Then when I feel really good about that, I'm going to start going up the sidewall and back down. So I'm going to do that same system of going through the side, going back up and grabbing the elastic. And I'm going to pull it through all the way, and I'm going to go all the way up as far as I can without getting the drawstring involved, and back down. And back up. This one I'm going to leave a little bit more room just because I'm going to go all the way back down again. I'm back near this drawstring seam, and I'm not going to do anything until I can feel the drawstring up higher. If I can feel the drawstring, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pull it so that it gets up in this top zone, so it's out of my way. So I can feel it up top, so I'm going to do a couple more stitches down here, since I know that it's not in my way. Maybe 2 stitches. And then I'm going to make my way all the way back down to that bottom corner again. I always want to make sure that I'm leaving enough thread for myself to tie a knot at the end. Just filling in those little gaps that I left myself. The more stitches I do, the more secure this is going to be. So I want it very secure, especially my elastics. And then I've got my super bright pink thread so that you can see it, but yours is probably a more neutral close match. I'm going all the way back down to that bottom corner. Couple more, and I should almost be there. I could probably put a few more on that bottom row, but I feel pretty good about how many I did. I'm going to go through that diagonal corner a little bit more, just really get myself all the way to that bottom corner. So now I'm at this bottom corner. What I'm going to do to tie off my knot, so I'm going to put my needle through, and I'm going to keep a hold of this loop. I don't want to let go of this loop. I'm going to pull my needle through. Now I've still got my loop. I'm going to take my needle, get that little thread out of there. I don't want that thread stuck in there. So I've got my needle and my loop. that I didn't pull through. I'm gonna take my needle, I'm gonna go through my loop and go around it, and then I'm gonna go around it. So I have my last loop. I'm gonna show you that twist one more time. So I have my last loop. I grabbed the loop before it went through. I take my needle and I go through, and I wrap it over, and I go through one more time. So if you can see, it's twisted twice. I'm gonna grab the sharp point of that needle and I'm gonna pull that knot tight and give it a good yank. You can stop there. If you're feeling crazy, I would add another one, which I always am. I always do another one. So I'm gonna go through, grab some fabric, hold my loop, pull the needle through while keeping my loop. Make sure that extra thread is through. I'm gonna go through my loop once, over and through my loop twice. Then I'm gonna grab the sharp edge of my needle and pull it all the way through and tight. Give it a good yank. Before I cut this off, I'm gonna do a tug test and make sure that this doesn't go anywhere. Everything is super secure. Nothing is feeling weird. If I were feeling like this was loose, I would go across it again before I cut it. But because I feel really good about it, I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm just gonna cut pretty close to that knot. And then it's ready to go. That back one is completely on. I don't have to worry about it. Then I'm gonna move on to this other back corner. I'm gonna take this out and repin it on that line. So you see how close this one is to this back? That's kind of how I want this one. Sometimes they get a little bit further off, but as close as you can get them, the best. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up that seam, that line right up on there at the correct angle, and I'm gonna pin it in place. Make sure everything is okay. They've both got an angle. And then I'm going to open that back up a little bit, flip my heel out just so that I have more room to sew. So then I'm going to thread my needle. I'm going to do the same loop system that I did. If I had a ton of thread left over from the last one, what I could do is just take a knot at the edge, like a classic needle knot, nothing fancy about it, and keep going and just have the knot be my base instead of the loop. But I always just like to start fresh with a new thread, know that I have enough length to keep going. For the length, what I'll do is I'll cut the thread in half. So you know I have my loop, and then I've got the half all the way down here. Generally speaking, I will have it be at the minimum the length of like my upper body. So like I'd go from like my hips to the top of my head, or like the length of my leg. Sometimes it's a little generous, sometimes it works out perfectly. So I'm going to take my loop, that's the center, and then I'm going to thread that loop through the hole in my needle. This just is my system, so I don't have to do a knot at the end, because I don't feel like the knots are the most secure. Partly because Sometimes I feel like I'm just not the greatest at them. And I don't want to rely on a knot that I don't feel amazing with. And I'm going to thread my needle through. I'm going to grab the loop that I just threaded through. And I'm going to pull it all the way through the needle, and I'm going to make my loop be the long end. So I'm going to pull, 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 so that the loose threads are about here, and then my loop is all the way down here. So I'm going to go back to my shoe. It's ready to go. And I'm going to start with this flap. And I'm going to go underneath the flap. Make sure that I get just the flap and none of the satin. I'm going to go diagonally through, just get that one secure corner. And then go through the elastic. And I'm going to pull my needle through. And I'm going to look for my loop. Don't let my loop go through. There's my loop. It hasn't gone through yet. I'm going to take my needle and go through the loop. Pull it out. And give it a good tug so it's secure. So now we've started our stitch without a knot. That loop is going to kind of act like how a knot would. Then I'm going to do a couple more stitches just around that zone, really solidify that spot. Keep pulling it through, giving it a good tug. Just a couple more. I'm going to go up that sidewall. So now on this one, we sewed all the way up the sidewall and then came down and cut it to go across. For this one, I'm just going to show you what it's like if you cut it first. So what I can do is before I even start, I can line up that and then cut like 1/2 inch below that line. So I got my one corner really good. Now I'm just going to cut across. So now it's just not going to be in my way. So that is an option. Now I'm going to go up this sidewall and back down, making sure that my angle stays really good. So I'm going to grab a piece from that side, go through the elastic. So from the side, under, through the bottom of the elastic and up. Again, not really grabbing any of the satin. We're just hanging out on the flap of the drawstring and maybe the lining. You'll know if you puncture through the satin if you flip it back out and you can see your stitch on this side. So I'm going to have a little bit of gappage in between each stitch going up just so that I have room to come back down. So I'm going to do a tiny gap, go up, through, and pull it. I'm going to keep going just like that. All the way up to the top. Well, not the top of the shoe. To the top of that drawstring seam. Through. Pull it. It doesn't have to be pretty, she just has to be secure. So I'm gonna get myself for sure at least to that seam in the shoe where that drawstring is held. And then I'm gonna feel for my drawstring If I can feel it, great. I'm going to go a couple more stitches up. And if I can't feel it, I'm not really going to go up there. So I can feel it about there. So I'm going to do a couple more stitches going up. I'm kind of on that seam line right now, so it's a little bit tougher to pull through, but that is okay. And I'm gonna go up one, maybe two more, and then all the way back down to that corner. So this is kind of what we're looking like. We've got a pretty big gap there that I'm going to fill in on the way down. But again, just making sure that everything stays away from that drawstring that's about there. So I'm going to go back down and fill in some of these gaps. Grabbing the drawstring fabric, grabbing the elastic, pulling through. Grabbing that sidewall, not puncturing the satin. It's pretty repetitive, honestly. Once you get a few good ones, you're solid. So now I'm kind of at that bigger gap that I left. And so I'm going to do a couple more really tight ones right here just to fill in that gap, because I do not want a space that feels unsecure. Try not to let your thread knot around itself, so keep everything pretty crisp and clean. So I filled in that gap, and I'm just going to keep going all the way to that bottom corner. Grab that side flap. Oh my goodness, you can't even see. So we're almost back to that bottom corner, and we've really filled in any gaps that we thought that we saw. And we're going to go around that diagonal corner again, kind of bevel it through. And then we're going to go across the bottom. And our bottom stitching is going to be fairly tight. So we're going to go underneath this bottom flap right here and up and pick up that elastic. So we're going to go up underneath and pull through the elastic. So up underneath both of those and pull through. Give it a good tug. And again, we're only going to go across the bottom once, so I want to make sure I don't leave too many big gaps anywhere. I want to make sure that every part that I cover on the bottom feels secure. As long as it feels secure to you, you are doing it right. If you feel like the bottom of your elastic is kind of fraying, you can either cut it and give yourself a clean edge, or you can grab your stitching a little bit higher up. So I could go and all the way up to there. I just can't go past that seam. But I could grab a bigger chunk of fabric if I felt like I wasn't liking the end. And again, I'm just gonna keep doing this all the way across that bottom. And then I'm gonna have two super gray elastics in the back, which I really want my back ones very secure. If you ever feel like you've got kind of loose stitching back here, just give it a good tug. It should tighten everything up. See that one? I ended up grabbing a little bit of that lining at the bottom, but I can't feel my puncture through the satin, so I'm not worried about it. You could even intentionally sew through the lining. You could grab both the lining and the drawstring flap. You would just have to be a little bit more careful about making sure you're not getting any of the satin. All the way to that corner, and we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go around the corner, up the side and down, and then cut it off. I'm going to start to go diagonally through that corner, kind of bevel it off, and then go up that side wall. Really keep an eye on that drawstring in the back. The back and the arches are kind of where they tend to get a little weird. So try and find it the best that you can before you go too far up. And if you can, kind of push it up to the top. And then we're gonna go up the side. There's not a ton of fabric on this side, but that's okay. We're just gonna make it super secure. Sometimes they have more of a flap and sometimes they have less. It just depends on the manufacturing. I'm gonna go up at least to that seam. And then if I feel good about the location of my drawstring, I'm gonna go 1, maybe 2 stitches higher. This back one is definitely a little more nerve-wracking, so I'm more cautious with it. Just because there's a ton of fabric back here. So it kind of feels like a thick area that you're going through. So it's a little bit harder to push the needle through, but also I get nervous about that drawstring. Now I'm going to go back down, now that I've reached my level of where I feel comfortable, and I'm going to go and fill in some of these spaces. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see any of these stitches except for you when you put your shoes on. When you get these sticky moments like this, a thimble is super useful on your thumb. So now I'm getting close to the point where these little extra threads are starting to want to get stuck. So I'm gonna give my needle a tiny tug so that my loose threads are higher up. Because I never want them stuck in the shoe, because that'll keep me stuck exactly where I am, and if something goes wrong, I won't have the ability to take my needle in and out. So I'm gonna go around this bottom corner a couple more times and then knot off and call it done. One more. Okay, so I'm going to do my knot exactly the same as I did the last time. So I've got my needle and my loop. So I'm going to go through just the next spot that I could go in. I'm going to keep a hold of this loop. I'm going to push my needle through, grab it, and not let go of this loop. I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to go through the loop once, through the loop twice. So that's the look we've got. I'm going to grab the sharp end and pull that twist really snug all the way to the end. Give it a good tug. I'm going to do one more. Pull the needle through, grab onto that loop so I don't lose it. Go through once, through twice, and pull it really tight. Give it a good tug, make sure that knot's in place. And then I'm going to give my elastic a tug, make sure it's not wiggling around. And then I'm going to cut it off fairly close to that knot. And now we've got our back two elastics pretty solid. They're at slightly different angles, but the angle is just determined by your foot and how it all lines up. So I've got my two that are pretty close to this back seam. Really liking that. And then we need to move on to the rest of the shoe. So our back is completely done. Then for our front section with the arches, I need to do the ribbon first. Otherwise, the elastics won't be able to work properly. So I'm going to sew the ribbon on, and I'm going to sew the elastic across like that, and I'm going to sew the elastic in the same spot, and they're going to be criss-crossed. So this back is going to go to this front, and this back is going to go to this front. But first I need the ribbon sewn on. For my ribbon, before I do any stitching, I'm going to verify that my shiny side is down. If I have my shiny side up where I can see it, like so, I will never see that shiny side ever again. So I need to make sure it's down on the part where my foot is going to touch, so that when I tie it like this, you're going to see it. So I'm only going to start with one side. Because we did this based off of our arch, it's probably a little bit snug. So if I lined up all of my lines, where's my other line? If I lined up this line on the edge of that seam like we've been doing, and if I lined this line on the edge of that seam, there's not a ton of give in the bottom of the shoe. And that's just because we did it to lift our arch up. But I don't want that to be permanently on my foot. Like, I don't want to cut off circulation to my foot at the bottom. I don't want to have weird tension on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my line on my ribbon, and instead of lining it up with the top line of the shoe, I'm actually going to line it up with one of these seams down here. So I could line it up on the stitching, or I could line it up down here, just depending on how much give I want. So I'm going to line mine up on the stitching, but I'm going to make sure that the line is very accurate. So I don't want to accidentally have my line sticking up like this, because that line is going to change how my shoe gets tied, and I want my ribbon to not be lumpy when I tie it. So I'm going to line that up with that thread, and I'm going to put it in between these two dots that I've made. So I need to line it up, place it in there. I'm going to hold it down, and I'm going to pin it a little bit lower than I'm going to sew, because I don't want this pin in my way. But I want to pin it so that I feel good about where this is. I don't feel like it's going to move. And I can verify it by kind of seeing the pencil line a little bit through, just a little bit. And if I felt like it was a little bit off, I would adjust it before I started sewing. So I feel like my line's a tiny bit crooked, so I'm going to adjust that. I'm going to look for that pencil line, line it up with the stitching, line it up with the dots, and pin. The ribbon that goes on the bottom of my shoe is not going to be cut at all. So I need to make sure that I sew really good across this bottom. So I'm going to thread my needle one more time, and we're going to start and make sure everything is perfectly same. We're going to start in this corner or this corner. It really doesn't matter which corner you start in. I typically start in this corner just because I'm left-handed, but you could start in this corner, go up, down, across, up, down. The thing about this one is that when you normally cut these back ones, we're not going to cut it. We're going to add the elastic before we do anything. So I'm going to start in this corner just because I'm left-handed and that's what I do. So let me thread my needle. For our threaded needle, before you get too attached to what you have threaded, I want you to think about how much length that you felt like you had when you were done over here, because if you felt like you didn't have very much fabric at the end of here, you need to go longer, because for the sides, ideally what's gonna happen is we're gonna go up the side, down, we're gonna go across, up and down, and we're not gonna cut it off, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our elastic from the opposite side and we're gonna attach it, and then we're gonna go up, down, across, up, down, and tie it off over here. So that's the goal here, is that we want to be able to do 2 passes without stopping and cutting our ribbon. The other way that this is gonna kind of work out is, so I've got my thread and my loop down here. It's a little bit longer than my last couple. Is we're gonna have more gappage in between each thread. So let me pull out kind of an example. So if you can see this shoe, so all the other, like if you were to do one single loop, you would kind of have all of your stitching be very side by side. But because we're gonna put an elastic on, I've sewn this elastic only halfway on because I want you to see how much space I have in between. There's a pretty good amount of space in between each stitch. You can't see this one as much because it's the same color as the shoe. But there's a pretty good gap because we're gonna go back in and fill this in again. So we're just getting the ribbon kind of ish in the right spot. And then we're gonna go in and put the elastic on and fill in all those gaps and make it super secure. Ideally, we never cut our thread while we're doing this. So that's kind of our goal right now. And I'm gonna show you with the brighter thread what this is gonna look like. Try not to get any knots in your thread now that it's a little bit longer. So I'm going to keep a hold on my loop because I don't want to lose it. I'm going to make sure that I can really still see that pencil line through because I don't want this to be wrong. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go underneath this corner. The other thing that's in the way is kind of this mid seam of the shoe. It could be in your way, it might not, it just depends on your foot shape again. Hopefully it's not, but if it is, it's just another obstacle to kind of go around. So I go through, underneath, and through the satin. It's easier to go through the ribbon because there's just really not much to it. Make sure that none of this gets stuck. And I've still got my finger holding this loop in place. I'm going to go through the loop. So I'm going to go through the loop with my needle, pull it through, and then snug that up so that it's nice and tight. One little grab right there. So I'm going to do a couple more just right in that spot, make sure it's really secure. Sometimes what happens on these little sides is that it depends on what happened with your shoe when it was just being put together. Is sometimes there's not a really good flap right here. Sometimes it's cut really short. So what you're going to do then is you're actually going to kind of intentionally grab a little bit of the white fabric, but do not grab any of the satin, just grab the white fabric. So you're going to kind of grab a little bit of fabric underneath, grab that top fabric, and pull through. So you have an option if your drawstring fabric, oh, my elastic is in the way, get out. You have an option if that kind of happens. It happens sometimes. Hopefully not, especially right now, but some things just are out of our control. I'm gonna really keep an eye on this. So now I'm gonna go up that sidewall and back down, and I'm gonna remember leave myself some gappage, even more so than I did going up the sides last time, because I gotta go up and down like 4 times on these sides. So I've got to give myself a good kind of chunk in between to fit more stitches. And remember, keep an eye on that drawstring, don't sew it down. Keep an eye on it. Don't let these dang elastics get in the way. Pull it snug. So now I've left myself, honestly, some pretty big gaps. And I'm gonna go back down and leave still some good gaps. And just take another big chunk a little bit further down. Pull her through. It looks slightly less secure, but that's what we're going for right now. So I'm going to go around this bottom corner again so that I can get myself to the bottom. And then I'm going to show you how to do the bottom of the ribbon, because again, when we did elastics, we kind of cut across that bottom line. We're not going to cut because we are going to keep this down here for a safety feature. So what we're going to do, if your elastics get in the way, just kind of pin them out, pin them away from you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of do a little bit of what we've been doing on this side wall, but down here. So I'm going to go on this ribbon and I'm going to grab a chunk of the ribbon straight through like this. So I'm going to go through the ribbon and I'm going to go down and I'm going to grab the flap and pull up and grab more ribbon. So I have to grab this flap. So what I'm doing still looks like a normal stitch, like how it went down and through and up. But now I've just got this ribbon in the way, so that flap has to be in this little bubble I'm creating. So I'm creating like a little tiny bubble where I grab ribbon, I grab the flap, and then I grab the ribbon again. And I'm just gonna pull it through. Making sure there's no knots. Don't let anything knot up, remember, because it's longer now, so it wants to knot up. Give it a good tug. So then I'm going to go further down, or further across. I'm going to go down, grab the ribbon, make a little bubble, pinch some of that bottom fabric, come back through. If I'm not pinching the drawstring fabric in between, I'm basically sewing my ribbon for no reason because I'm not attaching it to the shoe at all. So make sure no matter what, you are grabbing that. Give her a good tug. So again, pretty big gaps because we're gonna go across this again more secure with the elastic. Make sure I get that bottom fabric involved. And I'm just gonna go across as far as I can, creating some bubbles. Try and keep everything that you're not using out of the way. And now that this is kind of in place, I can move this pin out of the way. The only reason to use the pins is just to keep things where they need to go. But if you're not having a problem with that, you can take them away, because sometimes they tend to cause more problems than they help. So again, I'm just going all the way to this last corner, bevel it off a little bit on the edge, go around that bottom corner, go up the sides a little bit. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Not only because you're the only one that sees this, but also because this is gonna get a lot more attention. So this first layer is not that important to get pristine. And I'm gonna go a little bit higher up that seam because I can feel my drawstring. I'm gonna go a little bit lower. I'm gonna go back down that corner, leaving some pretty big gaps. Alright, so now I'm kind of back down in this corner. So we went up, down, across. I definitely could have left bigger gaps on these sides, but and the bottom. So we're back down in this corner. We're still attached with our thread. We've still got a good amount. We want to make sure we have a good amount. Then what I'm gonna do, if I got super worried about losing this needle for now, I could kind of just puncture it through and not worry about it. So then I'm gonna go to the opposite side. So I'm sewing this side. So I need to grab the opposite elastic. If I grab the same side, it's really not gonna do much support for me, because then my foot will just sit in the middle and my elastics are doing nothing. So I need to go all the way to the opposite side. I'm gonna find that line that I drew. So this is kind of where you have to be able to trust your ability to mark it. I'm going to go down about the size from the flap down. So I would call that about that length. And I'm just going to cut on the same line as my pencil line. Things are going to get a little bit more tight and snug. You see how much more crossed and close the shoe's getting. So now we're kind of losing a little bit of visibility. I'm going to take this line. You gotta line it up real good. And I'm going to make sure that that line lines up on the top of the shoe. So elastic lines are always the top of the shoe, because that's where we have put the tightness. Make sure it's really, really particular. And then I'm going to pin this in place. So everything that we are doing right now is a lot more snug. Things would be easier if I didn't do this back elastic yet, but then it would just be hard to attach the back elastic. So no matter what, things are going to get hard when you're crisscrossing. The loop people don't have that worry. Every stitch that they do is just open and exposed. But we are working in confined areas now. So now that I have drawn this line and it's connected appropriately, I'm going to grab my needle back out. And we're going to do everything all over again, grabbing the elastic and the ribbon and everything. So now we're on the opposite side. I'm going to grab my extra thread and kind of pull it down just because I feel like we're getting a little loose. So now we're in our tight little area. So we're going to start in that bottom corner, and we're going to start basically like we haven't done anything yet. So this part gets a little awkward. I'm going to go grab that corner. I'm going to grab the bottom fabric, the ribbon, and the elastic. The ribbon's super thin, so it's kind of like you're not really going through anything. And I didn't have to start a new loop because I didn't cut this. But if I was running out of fabric or thread, what I would do is I would have done my same tie the knot, cut the knot, and then I would have looped it again and started from scratch right here in one of these corners. But because we had enough, we got to keep going. If you don't, it's really not the end of the world. So then we've got our 2 good stitches, keeping our corner down. We're going to go up the side, back down. So now we get to go through and kind of fill in all of those gaps, but we also have to make sure this elastic gets super secure while we're at it. And it's a little bit harder to pull through now that we've got everything going. And my pin is a little bit getting in my way, but I don't want to move it at all because I need this elastic to be super secure. So let's push this through. It gets really awkward in this corner. Oh, do not let that drawstring get in there. If my drawstrings get in the way, what I do is I will just kind of yank them and shove them into the box of the shoe. Drawstrings the whole time, no matter in what form, just make sewing harder, whether they are up here or over there. So I'm going to keep going through, do more loops, pull it through. I'm going to go up as much as I can while getting it super secure and avoiding that drawstring in the casing. Your needle is going to be a little bit harder to pull through. Just give it some good tugs. Don't forget, we are going back down. I'm gonna go like maybe 1 or 2 more up. I'm gonna go back down, doing that same system that we've been doing for all of our other stitching. we're pretty much just doing the same thing over and over and over in slightly, very slightly different ways. Make sure there's no knots that like to pop up. We're getting lower. Couple stitches in too many of the same spots on these sidewalls and things get really hard to pull through. Always preventing any sort of twisting of your thread. So because I feel like my little ends are starting to cause problems, I'm going to pull my needle out a little bit more and get those ends further out. So now I'm close to this bottom corner. I'm going to go around the corner again, getting the ribbon, drawstring, and elastic. Really, I'm focusing a ton on the elastic right now, because the elastic is where I'm going to feel all of my support, so I want that to feel really good. I'm noticing a bit of some fraying on that elastic though, so I'm going to go and cut that off so it doesn't get in the way of my sewing. There. I want more of a clean line. So now that I've gone up and down quite a few times, it's very secure. I'm going to start going across the bottom with my elastic. So now I'm basically just going to do this similar to how I've done all the other elastics. I'm just going to kind of pretend like that ribbon is just not there. It's already attached, so now I've just got to go through it. And I can take my pin out because that sidewall is very secure and I feel really good about it. So I can try and find a new angle to hold this out that's going to be okay, but again, we're in a little cramped up area, so it's going to be awkward no matter what. So I have to go through that bottom. You're going to pinch a little bit of the ribbon just because it's there, it's attached. You're going to go through the ribbon, through the drawstring casing, and up through the elastic. Again, try and keep it as good as you can. You can't super see a ton of your previous stitching unless if you're really looking at it from that lower angle. But you'll kind of feel if you're going too far in the same zone. But as long as I feel good about it, I will go. And I will kind of just do it as secure as I possibly can. Again, I want it as close as I can on this bottom part, but I have to keep in mind that I have already punctured this quite a bit. And I need to make sure every loop that I do underneath, I'm grabbing enough of this bottom that I'm actually sewing the elastic to the shoe. You don't want to just be sewing elastic for fun, because that's really not fun. Just grabbing more and more across, making sure I'm getting that shoe involved, not just the ribbon or the elastic. The ribbon is not strong enough on its own to support the strength the elastic needs. Again, the angle is pretty awkward with the whole shoe kind of coming. That last side is gonna be your hardest side, I will say. Just because we're gonna be as cramped as humanly possible. Alright, so we did like a little flip to kind of pull this out, but when I flip it, I have to make sure that I'm pulling the elastic taut so that it's at the right line. And I'm going just a little bit higher up in a couple places just because I feel like it's easier to pull my needle through because there's less happening down there. I'm just going to keep going across. My goal in all of this is still to get enough of the shoe fabric involved that things are actually secure to the shoe, and that I feel like there's enough stitches in the end that I can give it a really good tug and everything is going to be good and solid. Come on. During this part, when you have to grab the most amount of fabric, you're more likely than other times to go through the satin on the other edge just because there's so much happening. And if you do that, it's totally okay. You'll just see one little small stitch on the satin. Nothing to worry about. Now we're all the way into this corner. And we're going to keep going around and around until I get all the way to that edge. So now I've gone pretty much to that far edge, and I'm going to go up that sidewall again. So I'm going to try and find a new angle to hold the shoe at, keep my excess threads out. And again, just finding a decent angle to work in. So grab that sidewall. Come up, make sure that you get the elastic. Because what we're worried about right now is all about the elastic. If things are super weird with your normal hand of stitching, you can try the other hand. If things just get really crazy in some of these corners, then we're gonna go up, 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 and back down, and then we're gonna cut down here. So I want to make sure that everything that I do for this ending is as secure as I can get it, because this is going to be kind of the last things that I do. So again, I'm on the side, going through and through. The ribbon is still hanging out back there. I'm just not very worried about it because it's secured on, it's in the right spot. Now I need to worry about this elastic. Don't get the drawstring involved. Leave yourself a little bit of a gap to go back down, but really keep your elastic as secure as you can. If things just at any point feel super weird, just adjust how you're holding it. Try out different ways. Try different angles. Right now I'm on the seam of the shoe and everything else, so things are really hard to pull through. I could use my thimble, but I'm also just trying to be really smart about where I'm putting my stitches so that I don't have as much to work around. But sometimes you're just gonna have to go in some not amazing places and just make sure that everything feels as secure as it's gonna feel by the time that we're done. My edges are getting a little close to the needle, so I'm gonna pull them out. I'm gonna go around these bottoms, get that corner a little bit more, and then I'm gonna knot us off. Let's do just one more in this corner. So now with this one, before I think about the knot, I'm gonna give all of it a really good, especially this elastic, like a really amazing tug. Because this elastic is gonna go through some stuff, so I wanna make sure that it's solid. I feel good about it, it didn't move, everything is in place. So I'm gonna knot everything off like I just did. I'm gonna do a little pinch, pull it through, and keep a hold of my loop. So I've got my loop and my needle. I'm gonna go through once, through twice. So it looks like so. I'm gonna grab the needle and pull it all the way through with that knot and pull that knot really tight at the end. Give it a really firm tug. Do one more just to be safe. Grab my needle. I've got my loop. I'm gonna go 1 time, 2 time, pull it through. Grab it an amazing tug. Make sure everything's super secure. Take my scissors and cut close-ish to that knot. And then we got one side done. So at this point, you're gonna untwist that. We have got 2 backs done and 1 sidewall. And you see how tight this is? So that last one's gonna be just fun. But you want it to be tight, especially because we're crisscrossing it. That's just the nature of what we're doing. So the next one we're gonna do is we're gonna do the other ribbon. The ribbon, she's fairly easy-ish. But this last elastic is gonna be a little bit rough, but that's okay. So let's get ourselves pinned in position, and then we are going to thread our needle. So we're going to start by looking at this line again and looking for these dots. So I'm going to look for my line on this side because I can see it just barely through this side. And I'm gonna make sure that if I were to stretch the shoe completely out on the floor, my ribbon goes all the way down into these divots. Otherwise it's gonna just put pressure on the top of my, or the bottom of my arch. So I'm gonna line everything up. Remember, I'm gonna line my pencil line up about to that thread about to that seam line. And I'm going to make sure that I look for these 2 dots on the top and get it in between those 2 dots. And I'm going to pin it in place. I don't necessarily need to pin it in place. Just a little extra security, especially for my first few shoes. You kind of get to a point where you might just be able to do it with your hands, no questions asked. So I'm going to thread my next needle. Again, I want it pretty long because it's got to go around and then around again. So I want this one longer than these ones. So I've got my extra long thread with my loop. I'm going to take my loop and put it through the hole of my needle. Same as all the times before. One thing that I really like about this loop method that I do is every single stitch is also a double stitch. So things are just even more secure than any other regular knot. So I'm going to take my loop and I'm going to make sure it's longer than my other one. And then I'm going to have a good grasp on my needle. I'm going to go back to my shoe. Verify that angle. Make sure that it's lined up. I can vaguely see the pencil mark through it, and then I'm going to double check those dots. I'm going to make sure my dots are in the right spot. And then I'm going to start by going underneath that flap through the ribbon all the way through. Remember, when you have extra long, you sometimes get a little more knots. I've got my loop. I'm taking my needle through my loop. Pull it through. Snug it up. I'm going to go up that sidewall, really keeping an eye on that angle. There it is. I'm going to use my thumb and pinch that fabric so it doesn't move even a little bit. And I'm going to do a few really gappy sides. I'm going to try and have this one be a little more gappy than the other side. I'm going to find that drawstring. I'm going to push it up. Okay. I really want to make sure that drawstring is not in my way because I've got a lot going on. I'm going to do another stitch. That'll be my top highest one. And then I'm going to make my way back down. So I only did like 3-ish stitches. I'm going to go back down, maybe do 2 or 3 to get to back down. Nothing crazy, just trying to get that ribbon to somewhat want to stay. It doesn't have to be pretty, just has to be somewhat secure. Yeah, so there's sort of what we're looking like. Pretty gappy. No worries though. I'm going to go across the bottom and leave it pretty gappy still. So I'm going to go and grab a chunk of the ribbon, go down into it, and I'm going to make sure that I grab underneath that extra loop right here. So I want to get underneath this fabric. So I'm going to go down in the ribbon, underneath, create a bubble where I've grabbed the ribbon, the casing for the drawstring, and then the ribbon again. And I'm going to come out, making sure that I'm getting that casing for the drawstring. Otherwise, I'm just sewing my ribbon for fun. I'm going to go a little bit off to the side and do another one. a little bit off to the side. Make sure I'm getting that drawstring casing and pull it through. She's pretty gappy. Just what we want. I can verify that line, I can kind of see it, I can double check it. Grab a pinch, pull it through. Don't let anything get in the way. Grab a pinch, pull it through. Oh, again. Pull it through. Get us off to that corner. Grab a pinch. My goodness. Pull it through. I'm going to go up that side just a little bit. Like 2 or 3 up, 2 or 3 down, if that many. Really keep an eye on that drawstring. Last one right here, and then I'm going to go back down. I'm right on this seam on the inside, so it's a little difficult. And sometimes your arch, just the way that your anatomy is, falls right on that drawstring every time, which is kind of how mine are. So, but it just depends on the shape of your feet and how they are. But it just might be a common situation for some people. So now I've got that ready. I'm going to hang out, let my needle balance right there. I could put it in the shoe, or I could just let it hang out. So then I'm going to map out about how much distance I'm going to need. So I'm going to want it cut about that low. I'm going to add a straight line cut of this elastic. Try and keep the cut as straight as you can, even if your line's a little bit loosey-goosey. And because my ribbon is secure, I can take that pin out that I didn't super need. And I can use that same pin to hold this in place. One thing that you want to keep in mind when you are doing elastics, this is the same for the loop, same for anything, is I want to make sure that when I pin this in place, I'm pinning it so that it's going to go straight across an ankle and back down. I don't want to have it twist because it's a little bit unfixable. Unless if we take the whole entire stitching out, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to really try and not lose that needle, because I did not connect it to the shoe, so it's just hanging out. And I'm going to try and keep this thread out of my way, because I'm going to keep using it. And I'm going to pin this in hopefully just the perfectly exact spot. Right there, line up my line with the top of the shoe. I'm gonna pin this. You can kind of pin things in weird areas, but as long as it stays secure for a short amount of time, that's what we're doing. So you can see how snug we are right now, which is zero fun. So what I'm gonna do is, currently I have my thread on this side and I don't want to be sewing through this tiny gap. So I'm actually going to take my needle and I'm going to grab it on the other end of this elastic. And so now I'm just hanging out on this side. So all what I did was I changed where I pull my needle through, just so that I feel like I have a little bit more room over here. So again, we are super snug. This is a tight, tight little corner that we're in. We can try and flip this out, but I really want to keep an eye on this line and not let it get crazy. So I'm going to double check that line before I stitch anything down. So I want to make sure that my line is right there. It's pretty close. I have just like a tiny bit extra right here that I could cut off right now, which I don't necessarily need to, but I think I'm going to just so that I have a little bit less going on. But I need to be super cautious about not cutting anything that I'm not supposed to cut. So I don't want to cut any thread, any shoe fabric, any ribbon. Okay, that looks a little bit better to me. Okay, so now we've got all of this sewn down and then we're just attaching the elastic on top. So I need to go back through this corner and I'm gonna treat this like I'm starting all over, even though I'm not. I could start over. I could have knotted this elastic and then just started with a loop right here. So I'm gonna go underneath the ribbon and underneath the other drawstring flap, and then I'm going to go up through the elastic so you can kind of see everywhere that we are right now. And I don't have to look for that loop because we didn't start all over. But now I've got to keep going and really secure this elastic. So I've got to go up those sidewalls again. And I've got even more just craziness that's happening. These back corners closest to the ankle are always the most difficult in my opinion, just because of their back here where there's kind of a lot of chaotic things happening. And then I'm always on the side seam. But you might not be. But again, just the crisscross method is a little bit crazy when we sew, just because of how tight the elastics tend to make things, which is good because we want them to be super secure, and on our feet later it just makes the sewing part a little bit not so fun. Again, if you feel like you're at like a super awkward angle, just try and grab the shoe at a different angle, hold it with a different hand, flip it around, see if anything makes it better. You're not going to feel amazingly comfortable just with the nature of what we're doing right now, but whatever you can do to make this easier on you, try it out. So we're going to go a little bit up and then all the way back down. Again, keeping an eye on that drawstring. Even though we're thinking about 100 things right now, we still can't forget about that drawstring. adjust my angle, see if I can get a little bit better angle happening here. All the way down in this corner. I'm gonna go around that corner again. Then we're gonna go across the bottom edge. So I'm gonna go down, pinch the ribbon, pinch the drawstring casing, and go up through the elastic. Oh, do not want to finish that loop through, because I would be grabbing the elastic real bad up there. Good eye to keep on. Pinch all of those bottom layers. Adjusting my angle if I feel like things are going weird. There we go. Made sure we didn't have a knot there. Again, for this bottom, I want to really make sure I'm pinching that drawstring flap. Otherwise, I'm just sewing the elastic to the ribbon, and that is not useful to me at all. Because as pretty as your ribbons are, and they're a little tiny bit supportive, they're not supportive enough to hold these heavy duty elastics. So I want to be making sure I'm getting for sure that tough drawstring fabric involved. And if I feel like I leave a little bit of a gap that could be filled, I'm going to go back and fill it, just because this is the only thread that is securing my elastic down, and I want it to be really secure. You can go a little bit back and forth and fill in whatever gaps that you feel should be filled in. You don't have to constantly be moving in a specific direction. I want to make sure I get that bottom fabric involved. Even if I have to pinch a little bit higher up, closer to that drawstring seam, that's what I'm gonna do, as long as I make sure I'm getting it. You can always give it a little tug every now and then, see if anything is kind of coming off in a weird way, so that you can fix it before we get to the end. So again, we want it to be secure, not necessarily cute. And you can always try around with a little bit less stitching. See, you know, how much you actually need, but it's a risky game to play. Just to mess around and see with how little stitching you can get away with. So for now, we just want to be extra secure. I feel like my little loose threads are coming close to the shoe, so I'm going to give my needle a little bit of a tug and keep going. So the further away I get from the back heel of the shoe, the easier this is, in my opinion. You could feel the completely opposite, and that's totally okay. Make sure that doesn't get in the way. And tug, tug, tug. What you'll notice, sometimes it happens, is your thread or your elastic could be slightly thicker or narrower than your ribbon. So like right now, they're lined up pretty good right here, but I have extra right here. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of cutting that corner and going up, like my stitching on the inside already has, I'm going to take this out so that you can see, because it's already secure. So instead of going up that exact seam, I'm going to go up the side of this elastic, because what I care about right now is getting this elastic secure. So I'm going to go all the way to the corner of this elastic and only worry about this elastic when I get past that little moment. So I'm going to start kind of going around this corner up here. Then I'm going to go up the side wall like I normally have been for all of my elastics. I'm going to make sure I give myself a little bit of give, just because I'm going to go down again. So I don't want to overdo it and have nowhere to go through on my way down. Make sure I feel the drawstring before I do anything above that seam. You don't even have to go above that seam if you don't want to. I just like a little bit more security on the side. It's going to be my last one there. And then I'm going to go back down and cut it off. Give it a good tug. Make sure nothing comes loose, and then we're going to have one shoe completely done, and then we have to do it again on the other shoe. Oh, I got my little tiny threads kind of stuck on that one, so I'm going to pull those out. Give myself a little bit more of a give so that my threads are out. And just do a few tiny more stitches right here to get us to finish off. And then I'm gonna knot it. So for my knot, I'm gonna go underneath, just in wherever my next position is. I'm gonna keep a hold of that loop. So this loop. So I'm gonna make sure that my extra threads come through. So I've got my needle, my thread sticking out over here, and then my finger is holding this loop. So I'm gonna snug that up a little bit. I'm gonna take my needle through once, out, through twice. So that's the look we've got. And I'm gonna grab onto this edge and I'm gonna pull it all the way through and snug that knot tight. Give it a good tug. We're gonna do it one more time. Put those threads in a good spot. Go underneath, back up. Hold my loop so I don't lose it. And I'm gonna go through once, through twice, grab the needle and tug that knot tight. So I'm gonna give everything a really good tug, especially that elastic and the ribbon. And then I'm gonna give it a cut all around that knot. And then I have my shoe with these back ones really close together, across of my elastics, my ribbon shiny side down, and everything is nice and secure. This is going to be a little bit awkward when you put it on your foot, so you're going to have to find this little teeny tiny space and you're going to have to try and hold it open as much as you can and give it a good kind of stretch of the elastics, because you have to put your foot through that teeny tiny gap. So it's going to be a little bit hard at first, and then you're going to put your heel through there. We're going to tie the ribbons. I'm going to teach you how to tie them. I'm going to teach you the lengths. The knot is going to end up about right here, so it's not going to be on the tendon or the bone. It'll be right in this in-between space. And then we're going to cut your ribbon to be about 2 to 3 inches long, and then I'm going to burn the edges so they don't fray. So that's what we're going to do in class next time, and we're going to have it all about that. So now you have one shoe completely done, and you get to do one more exactly like this, and then you will be done. So just for a recap, the single loop shoe ends up looking like this. You have your ribbon that goes across and your loop that is sewn here. Make sure that your loop is not twisted if I were to stick my foot in there. And then for your crisscross, you have your ribbon sewn on across the bottom. You've got your 2 elastics sewn onto that ribbon and onto the shoe, not just the ribbon. And then you've got your back corners sewn on as